Harande here, Managing Director of Full Moon Limited and the co-founder of the TriUnity movement, which has now evolved into TriUnity Benefit Festival. Just giving a bit more insight in terms of how TriUnity was conceptualized and some of the bodies, foundations, and sponsors that are associated with the event. And I use the word sponsors a bit hesitantly because for me, partners is actually a bit more appropriate. In particular, this morning I wanted to talk about Carib and their involvement. And when I say Carib, I speak of Carib in terms of the entire brewery. My journey, which really encompasses the creative direction of Full Moon, has been intertwined and plaited in a very peculiar way with Carib from since I was a teenager at St. Mary's. I played football for St. Mary's under 14, come all the way up, and had a pretty successful venture athletically, which led me to a soccer scholarship in the US. But in my earlier days, one of the commentators that I always got a lot of love from while he was commentating St. Mary's games was actually Colin Murray. And I mentioned that plot there because Colin Murray, from a sporting perspective or from a cultural perspective, is an icon in himself and is something that has been intertwined with the Carib brand. For me, when I think about some of the essentials in the DNA of being a Trini, Carib has always been there. And speaking about Carib in a wider sense across brands, case in point, Stag, Heineken, Moccasin, and so on. But there was somebody at Carib that saw Colin Murray and said, this is a guy worthy of representing what we stand for at Carib. And I don't have the figures to show, but from my experience, from my dad's experience, and probably might have gone beyond that as well, there's something about celebrating in Trinidad that is entwined with beer drinking. And when you think of beer, you think of the brewery, whether you're a Carib drinker or a Stag drinker. There is a way that we would do it that the brand represents. And I think Colin in himself has represented that across genres in culture. You think of Great Race, you think of Colin. You think of sports, you think of Colin. You think of Soca Monarch, you think of Colin. Carnival in the whole, Colin's name is there. And I'm seeing a similar battle being handed with my good friend Antron as well, but that's a whole nother story. Colin, in essence, he wouldn't have known it then, but for me, I felt comfortable when he was announcing games. I felt like whatever I do would be highlighted or respected by him because he had that eye and he had that attention for detail. And it so worked out, there was one particular game that St. Mary's played against Belmont, I believe. I think it might have been one of the openers for the season. It being the opener of the season against Belmont, who at the time there was a very stiff rivalry with. I scored a double in that game. We actually won the game 2-1. But that particular tape was one of the tapes that I hunted and found to use to send outside to scouts that were looking for players in the US. So for me, knowing Colin commentary within the game was to my liking, or was in a particular manner that I felt good enough to send that particular copy, said something to me. Colin would have been none the wiser at the time. So that football career, all of that came to pass. Fast forward some years later, after graduating and whatnot, and moving back to Trinidad, Full Moon was actually registered in 2004. But we did a lot of work in the background as a service provider. We ended up planting our flag within Caribbean Prestige through the introduction to Karina Suku and then to William Monroe, which changed my life in a major way. But at that level, I was able to interact with Carib and Colin being a sponsor of Soca Monarch and be able to see the growth of Carib as a brand within Carnival through Soca Monarch, but also outside of that with what they would do culturally throughout festivities. You know, we as an island have many holidays, and Carib would always be present. The brewery, in terms of the brands across the board, would always be present in a way that would stand out. Fast forwarding again, working my way up within Caribbean Prestige Operations Manager, I was now in a position where I felt like my creativity could be more recognized and heard. And there was a concept that I penned, which was the Breakout Artist of the Year. It was done within a year and it really didn't get any attention. So I made a point the following year. As it is now, it's known as the Carib Breakout Artist, powered by Islam, driven by Ford. When the idea in my head in terms of what it could have done for the competition and what it could have done for the next generation of artists was sold to Carib, Colin, they immediately saw it and they jumped at it and took title sponsorship of it. For me, that really validated my creative ideas and concepts, and then seeing it out full, particularly with the first duel it had in the first year between Mr. Killer and Irfan Alves in particular. I was very passionate about getting in with them, getting their views, getting their perspective on how the competition has affected them and given them an opportunity to shine from within a wider competition. I think it's something I'm really proud about, and it's something that Carib treasures as well. So again, showing that connectivity between my concepts and Carib, and indirectly Colin. From a Full Moon Limited perspective, TriUnity to me is a celebration of what it means to be Trini, using three catalysts that I'm passionate about, which is food, music and fashion. Working with my creative team, in particular Ricky Fernandez, we were able to bring forward visually the ideas that we have spoken about within the office over a couple of months. I take my concepts passionately and I align myself with brands in a particular manner, because as good as it may seem on paper, the rhyme and reason behind the concept to me really has to make sense. And Carib just made sense to me. And within that, immediately Colin comes to mind, and you see where that alignment of the way we celebrate as Trinis throughout the years, if you go back to the old ads into the new, from when I was a teenager to being a full adult now. As somebody in the entertainment industry, I must take my hat off for the person who saw the talent in Colin, and then the way Colin himself has evolved over the years with the brand, and always being able to capture and partner with our culture, from the small man to capitals of industry. You would see throwing back a beer and celebrating in a particular manner that says the brewery. They represent the way we celebrate, and that is not an easy task. I feel privileged to be able to do this with this concept, especially with it having a slight conscious twist in it. The way we have aligned ourselves with Tallman Foundation, Swimming to Success, and Ishtara Center, to be able to break off a piece of this celebration and give back to folks that are doing something in a meaningful way to our youth and to our holistic well-being. And I think the idea and rhyme and reason behind the TriUnity movement has that standard, Colin Murray standard, a Caribbean standard, a Trini saluted standard of celebrating within it, and at the same time being able to give back. So Colin, hats off to you. Thank you for your support, and thank the wider audience for supporting this TriUnity concept and movement that we're going to have on November 21st at Adam Smith Square. I also want to say a special shout to Karen Valentine and his worship, Raymond Timke, and the city of Port of Spain for also having the vision to support an entity and a movement like this?
The catalyst for the partnership between the Port of Spain Corporation and Full Moon came about as a result of the capital city's passion and love for culture, which encompasses the three tenets of the event's objective, which is food, fashion, and music. My favorite genre of music, I would say, for me personally, would definitely have to be calypso / soca, because I'm coming from a steel band background. I've born and grew in the steel band fraternity, and I'm still very much active in the steel band fraternity. So the pan, as anybody will know, there's a relation, with the steel pan and calypso and soca music. So definitely calypso and soca is I would say, is the top of my list in terms of my favorite genre of music. I'm also happy to know that the world governing body for steel pan, that is TriUnity, is on board with such an event. I myself, being an honorary member of TriUnity and a scholarship recipient of the steel pan fraternity back in 2004, I'm very happy to partner with the world governing body for steel pan, TriUnity, and the steel band body by extension, and I know they will bring their own special, unique talents to this major event. His Worship the Mayor of Port of Spain, members of Council of the Port of Spain Corporation, and by extension, the entire city body. We are excited to be on board and to partner with the Full Moon Group in bringing forth such a dynamic presentation of food, fashion, and music at Adam Smith Square in Port of Spain, November 21st, 2015. The city recognizes and we truly acknowledge the fact that our capital city is full and rich in culture, in taste, and in the arts. And we implore each and every one of you to come out and have a grand time. You can bring out the family, you can bring out friends, loved ones to the famous Adam Smith Square on Arapita Avenue on November 21st, 2015. It's something to experience, I've never seen before, never experienced before in our great city. And we look forward to having you, hosting you, and to having a really good time as we explore such a magnificent evening of the TriUnity's food, fashion, music.
Not just from the outside, but actually coming in creatively as well and supporting and aligning with us, or rather we are aligning with them to celebrate with the city, in the heart of the city, for the entire population of Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you very much. City of Port of Spain.